You know, I thought I would have a little bit more time to do a follow-up video after my initial analysis of Through the Looking Glass Ruins when it came to Luz and Amity. But here we are only 3 weeks later. There's a lot I want to talk about with Knockin' on Hooty's door, but obviously Luz and Amity were going to be a topic for a video. Specifically, I like how this episode built off of the previously mentioned Through the Looking Glass Ruins, but also the episode Enchanting Gromfright. And I know the timing was coincidental, but given to what happens in Knockin' on Hooty's door, the fact this aired almost exactly a year after Enchanting Gromfright just adds to how special this episode is. So like before with Through the Looking Glass Ruins, I'm going to do an analysis on Luz and Amity's scenes together. Now, Luz's dilemma this episode is that she's torn between trying to get more information from the Echo Mouse and also working up the courage to ask Amity out. Since she's not getting anywhere with the Echo Mouse, she shifts her focus to Amity. In Through the Looking Glass Ruins, Luz realized that Amity liked her. And for someone like Luz, this is a big deal. Not only because this means that Amity reciprocates her feelings, but since she was an outcast and seen as a weirdo back at home, she probably never found herself being someone's crush. And as we'll learn in a bit, Luz's experiences with crushes haven't had the best results. Since Amity just bolted after the kiss and has also been avoiding Luz, even staying home from school, Luz is still left thinking about the kiss and what her next move will be. That move being asking Amity out, even referring to her as a cotton-candy-haired goddess. Since Luz thinks Amity is smart, cool, and classy, she wants to ask her out in an extravagant way. And here we learn that Luz was made fun of for being cheesy back at home, so she's had her fair share of rejection. The Boiling Isles have always been a fresh start for Luz in breaking away from her life back at home, and the situation with Amity is no different. She doesn't want a repeat of what she's already experienced. But this brings us to the basement where Luz finds that Hooty has kidnapped Amity. And I know I brought this up in my review, but the leitmotif here is one that we've heard a few times before, back in Wing It Like Witches, twice in Escaping Expulsion, and now here in Knockin' on Hooty's door.
Oh, Luz, you're here! I mean, obviously you're here, this is school, and you go here now, with, me.
I see. Looks like our precious Mittens has been getting distracted.
Hey, I get it. You're scared of her, but I'm not. And I need you to take me to her. She seemed open to talking things through.
No, Luz, you don't have to do that. Where are we? I think Hooty brought me here?
Well, this is our basement. I am so sorry about this. Hooty's been acting weird all day.
I just love it when shows can string together musical themes between characters. But this interaction is the first time that these two have seen each other since the kiss. Like I said before, Amity has been avoiding Luz at all costs, so she's completely unaware of how Luz feels. Now Luz is very extroverted and openly affectionate. As we just learned, she has tried asking out her crushes before, but on the other side we have Amity, who is more introverted and reserved. Only recently has she started to shed the aloof disposition she kept up for so long and become more vulnerable. So Amity making a big move like kissing Luz has her far out of her comfort zone and is 1, embarrassed that she did something like that in the first place, and 2, worried that she might have ruined things between her and Luz. Luz is by far the best thing that has happened to her. As stated in Through the Looking Glass Ruins, even though things have gotten a bit crazier with Luz around, Amity is the happiest she has been in years. It's a situation where she clearly would like to be more than friends with Luz, but doesn't want to ruin the friendship they currently have. Basically, she'd rather have Luz in her life as a friend rather than doing anything that would cause Luz to not want to be in her life at all. Not only that, remember from Enchanting Gromfright, Amity's biggest fear is rejection from Luz. The kiss was an act of a confession, so the ball is kind of in Luz's court at this point. So her not wanting to get rejected and also not wanting to ruin things between her and Luz is why she wants her to forget about the kiss to try and go back to normal. Now from Luz's perspective, Amity wanting to forget the kiss makes it seem like she's changing her mind and that the kiss was a mistake. Considering Luz has had her share of rejections, this is starting to feel like how things were back at home. And she quickly tries to change the subject and get Amity out of the basement, but Hooty of course has other plans. This brings us to the Tunnel of Love, which for Luz is the worst possible situation since it was everything she was trying to avoid so she doesn't get made fun of again. But for Amity, it's where she actually starts to realize that Luz may like her back. And the two having very different thoughts and feelings on the whole situation is what leads to the major misunderstanding on how they feel about each other. Luz destroying everything probably because it's similar to the cheesy stuff that led to her getting made fun of back at home, and Amity interpreting Luz's actions as her not reciprocating feelings and essentially getting rejected. Even the face that she makes here is very reminiscent of the one that she made in Enchanting Gromfright when Luz tore her letter. Once they reach the end of the tunnel, the nightmare line is interesting because essentially they both experienced the thing they were trying to avoid. While Amity didn't make fun of Luz for the over-the-top tunnel of love, it definitely wasn't the way Luz wanted things to go in regards to asking her out. And for Amity, she thinks Luz isn't interested in her and getting rejected. For both, they've each recently gotten a fresh start with their lives. For Luz, it was coming to the Boiling Isles, and for Amity, it was Luz's arrival. And each were making progress. Luz making friends like Willow and Gus, and also not being seen as the weirdo outcast, finding the people who love and accept her for who she is. And for Amity, it's a similar situation of finding those who love and accept her so she can actually be her own person and shed herself from her parents' expectations that have weighed on her for so long. Since both have surrounded themselves with the right people, they find that they are happier than ever. But with that comes the vulnerability of having to face their fears regarding their relationship with each other. Luz referring to the tunnel of love thing as stupid obviously wasn't implying that her and Amity dating was stupid. Considering the treatment Luz got back at home when it came to crushes, of course she's going to want to dismiss the idea as her own, since it's probably similar to the cheesy stuff she's tried before. But from Amity's perspective, she thinks she's just reliving her fear of being rejected by Luz. She tries to play it off jokingly, but that quickly breaks as she starts to cry. And it's here Luz, and also Hooty, realizes how her actions came across. And honestly, considering this is Luz, hurting Amity is probably worse than her getting made fun of. But since Hooty also realizes that the plan didn't go well, this causes a whole commotion that does eventually lead to Luz getting the opportunity to ask Amity out. A fun detail I do want to point out though is the scene where King saves Luz and Amity from getting crushed. The colors for the effects in the background were specifically from the lesbian and bi flags. Color designer Mari Alazor tweeted out the following: "This makes me very happy because I did reference the lesbian and bisexual flag for the effects in this scene. Waited a whole year for this." She went on to say, "I definitely believe when you hire queer and POC artists to work on queer and POC stories, there's an extra layer of genuine details and love you get that you can't get anywhere else." Which kind of perfectly segues to my next point of the normalization of LGBTQ rep on the Boiling Isles. I've said it before in other videos and I'll say it again here. It is so refreshing to see representation treated like this in the show. In my interview with Owl House creator Dana Terrace along with Amphibia creator Matt Brawley, this was something that Dana specifically wanted.
In creating the Boiling Isles, from the very conception of it in development, I wanted this world to be free of homophobia, free of transphobia, free of that very specific flavor of hatred, and it's just I do think it's important to show the struggle many queer kids face in conservative homes and countries, but it doesn't quite feel like an inopportune time. But I also think it's equally important to just show this stuff being super normalized, especially because I knew that this show was going to be watched by kids and their parents, and the little Disney logo was going to be in the corner. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we should be leaning on Disney to, be the spearhead of any change. They are just a media corporation looking to make a buck. Right. But you just know that with a brand as widely known as Disney, seeing like a girl have a crush on another girl be completely normalized, no one really bats an eye on it. It just feels good. It just feels like, oh man, I wanted to see it normalized and just treated super, super chill. If there's any problems between the characters, it's over other story stuff, but never about that.
Especially after this episode, I think it's pretty easy to see why it's so important to normalize LGBTQ representation. As important as it is to tell stories about the struggles the LGBTQ+ community faces, it's equally as important to tell stories where it's fully accepted. I mean, look at the scene with Luz and Ida. Ida isn't shocked that Luz likes Amity, rather she's surprised that Luz wants to ask someone out in general. And Ida is so supportive of Luz's decision and gives her the wonderful advice of just going for it, not worrying about it being perfect, and wishing her good luck. It's the kind of thing I and many others would have loved to have seen when they were younger. Additionally, when we see this kind of representation normalized, a character being queer isn't the sole focus. Most of the time, an LGBTQ+ character's main conflict will be coming out, coming to terms with their sexuality, or facing oppression. Again, it is important to tell those stories, but getting a show like The Owl House and having characters like Luz and Amity in a world where being bi or lesbian is seen as no big deal means that we can explore other conflicts they face and see their characters grow outside of that specific aspect. It's just so nice and refreshing to see. But this brings us to Luz actually trying to ask Amity out. And just a small detail I like is how Amity grabbing her clothes when she is anxious is something we saw in Enchanting Gromfright and something we see again in this episode. But Luz finally gets the opportunity to ask Amity out, and it's definitely not the way she would have thought. From Luz's perspective, things are already pretty bad, with Hooty kidnapping Amity, throwing her into the basement, forcing them to go through the tunnel of love, and then giving off the impression that the thought of them dating is stupid. So we're definitely far from the perfect scenario that Luz had in mind for this moment, but like Ida said, it doesn't really need to be. Similar to the kiss from Through the Looking Glass Ruins, I think things happening more naturally have a bigger impact than big grand gestures. Those are sweet, obviously, but there's something about the simplicity and genuineness of acts of affection happening in the moment that hits different. Now in all of this, Luz is in a position of not even knowing what her future has in store. Back in Hunting Palisman, we saw that she didn't even want to carve her palisman since there was still so much uncertainty in her life. But Amity is one of the positive things that she has right now, and even though she is unsure of what the future holds, she wants her to be in it, which shows how much she means to Luz, which is also why she wanted to do something so extravagant for asking her out. But by the end, Luz realizes that she doesn't have to do some big grand gesture, she just has to be herself. One of the big themes in the show isn't necessarily trying to fit in. It's about being yourself and finding those who love and accept you for who you are. I mean, we got the "us weirdos stick together" line in the very first episode. And obviously, Amity likes Luz for who she is. But with Luz's history of being an outcast, rejected, and made fun of, she felt like she had to be someone other than herself to get Amity to like her, even saying that Amity is too cool for something like the Tunnel of Love. Little does Luz know that her being the silly, compassionate goofball she is what made Amity fall for her in the first place. And since Amity even says she's not as cool as Luz thinks, she probably liked the Tunnel of Love stuff anyway. After all, Amity is coming from a place of being reserved and aloof for most of her life, so something so cheesy as the Tunnel of Love is actually endearing to her. But this leads to the perfectly imperfect and awkward scene. Luz struggling to get the words out, and then right before she gets the courage, Amity blurts them out. Now in this moment, both of them are facing their fears. For Amity, her biggest fear in Enchanting Gromfright was rejection from Luz, and now here she is asking her out. Almost exactly a year after Enchanting Gromfright aired too, which just adds to how great this moment is. And for Luz, this moment definitely didn't go the way she expected, but she built up the courage to finally ask Amity out. It wasn't something big and flashy, it was simple, sweet, genuine, and awkward, which makes it perfectly imperfect. I mean, Amity says yes. She didn't need or want something overly extravagant. She just wanted Luz to be herself, the Luz that she fell for in the first place. And I think sweet, genuine, and awkward fit Luz pretty well. I mean, just look at the scene of her holding her hand out afterwards and the little thumb rub and both of them admitting that things are still scary. Like, this is adorable as hell. And that's the other big thing. These two are now canonically a couple with more than half of season 2 to go and a third season still on the way. Which means we'll get to see their relationship grow and develop. Usually these kinds of things are saved for the last episode of a series. But now we still have plenty of show to explore this relationship, and not only that, but just Luz and Amity as individual characters. I keep saying it pretty much every video at this point, but season 2 of the show has really been an instance of catching lightning in a bottle with how incredible it has been so far. And that also goes for the representation that we have gotten along the way. To think that we would have a canon bi and lesbian couple in an animated show aimed at a younger audience. Dana and the crew are really outdoing themselves, and all of their hard work is so appreciated. Especially with all the episodes after Through the Looking Glass Ruins being done from home, because that's when the pandemic hit. But I'll always be thankful that I get to watch and experience a show like The Owl House as it airs. It's truly been one of the positives and highlights in an otherwise crazy past year and a half. And for someone like me who usually doesn't get that invested in romance plot threads, being able to see two wonderfully written characters like Luz and Amity grow over the course of the show, and now being canon girlfriends, has and will continue to warm my heart. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and until next time guys, take care.